Welcome back to Thinkiverse Podcast, the YouTube channel unlocking knowledge across the spectrum every day. I'm Ryan Lamas, and I'm excited to be diving into another fascinating topic with you today.
And I'm Rona Escledo, ready to unpack some truly mind-bending information.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for more upcoming podcast updates.
Absolutely.
Today, we're exploring a health topic that's turning heads in the world of endurance sports.
Okay.
Extended fasting and its impact on athletic performance.
Interesting.
Specifically, we'll be looking at the experience of Dr. Ian Lake, a type 1 diabetic who did something that sounds almost impossible. He fasted for 5 days straight while running nearly 100 miles.
You heard that right, folks. 5 days, no food, 100 miles?
Yeah, this deep dive is going to challenge a lot of conventional wisdom about how we fuel our bodies,
Absolutely.
especially for endurance activities.
Right.
Okay, I have to admit, my jaw dropped when I first read about Dr. Lake.
Really?
I mean, most people would consider fasting for that long risky,
Yeah.
even without the intense physical exertion.
Yeah.
But for someone with type 1 diabetes, it seems even more daring.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so crucial to understand the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes.
Right.
Many people think they're similar, but they're actually quite distinct. For our listeners who might not be familiar, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition where the body doesn't produce insulin, the hormone that regulates blood sugar.
Right, so folks with type 1 diabetes need to inject insulin regularly to manage their blood sugar.
Exactly.
It's not just about watching what they eat.
Yeah.
It's a matter of carefully balancing insulin intake with their activity levels and food choices.
Exactly. Now, type 2 diabetes, which is often linked to lifestyle factors like diet and exercise, involves insulin resistance.
Okay.
The body produces insulin, but the cells don't respond to it effectively.
I see.
It's like your body's ignoring the signals, which leads to elevated blood sugar levels.
So two very different conditions with very different management strategies.
Yes.
But in Dr. Lake's case, both types of diabetes share a critical element: the way the body uses fuel. And this is where things get really interesting.
This is where the concept of fuel switching comes into play. You see, our bodies can use two main sources of energy: glucose, which comes from carbohydrates and fat. Most of the time, especially after a carb-heavy meal, our bodies prefer to run on glucose.
So we're basically sugar-burning machines.
Pretty much. But when you lower your insulin levels, either by reducing carbs or fasting, something remarkable happens.
Like that?
Your body flips a switch and starts burning fat for energy instead of glucose.
Hold on, are you telling me our bodies can switch from burning sugar to burning fat?
Exactly. And this metabolic state where your body is primarily burning fat for fuel is called ketosis.
Wow.
This is what Dr. Lake tapped into during his 5-day fast and 100-mile run.
Okay, so Dr. Lake, a type 1 diabetic who needs insulin to manage his blood sugar, is out there running multiple marathons, burning through an insane amount of calories.
Yes.
All while fasting. And he's doing it by essentially becoming a fat-burning machine.
Right.
This just boggles my mind.
It is pretty amazing, isn't it? And remember, he wasn't alone. He ran with 7 other people, all burning a massive amount of calories, estimated at around 20,000 each during the experiment.
Wow.
They were literally depleting their glycogen stores, that's the stored form of glucose in the muscles and liver, and forcing their bodies to shift into ketosis.
So they were running purely on fat stores.
That's right.
No energy gels, no sugary drinks, just their own body fat.
That's right. And they weren't just doing this to prove it was possible. They wanted to demonstrate the safety and effectiveness of nutritional ketosis, particularly for type 1 diabetics, which is often met with skepticism.
But wait a minute, didn't we say earlier that low insulin levels can be dangerous for type 1 diabetics? Something about diabetic ketoacidosis.
Yeah.
Isn't that a risk with this kind of extended fasting?
You're right to bring that up. Diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA, is a very serious complication for type 1 diabetics when insulin is absent. Without insulin, their blood sugar can get dangerously high, and the body starts breaking down fat at an uncontrolled rate. This leads to a buildup of ketones in the blood, which becomes acidic and can be life-threatening.
Okay, so DKA is a real danger. But how is that different from the nutritional ketosis that Dr. Lake was experiencing?
That's a crucial distinction, and I'm glad you asked. Nutritional ketosis, the state Dr. Lake and his team were in, is induced by diet or fasting and is a controlled metabolic state. Importantly, it happens under the regulation of insulin. Dr. Lake was still injecting insulin to manage his blood sugar, so his body was burning fat for energy in a regulated way. He was in ketosis, but not in DKA.
Wow, that makes so much sense. So ketosis itself isn't dangerous. It's the lack of insulin in type 1 diabetics that makes DKA a risk.
You got it. For people with healthy insulin function, whether they have type 2 diabetes or no diabetes at all, a ketogenic diet or even fasting doesn't lead to ketoacidosis. It's a completely different physiological process.
Okay, that's a huge relief to hear. So Dr. Lake was proving that a controlled ketogenic state, even for someone with type 1 diabetes, can be safe
Yeah.
and even beneficial.
Right.
But I'm still curious about the personal side of things. What was it like for him to adapt to a ketogenic lifestyle and incorporate fasting into his training?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to understand the science, but it's another to actually put it into practice.
You're absolutely right. Dr. Lake was already following a ketogenic diet, so his body was fat adapted, meaning it was used to burning fat for fuel. But adding fasting into his exercise routine was a whole new challenge. He said it was tough initially, especially psychologically. We're so conditioned to believe that we need to eat before, during, and after exercise.
Yeah, I totally get that. Every sports drink commercial, every energy bar wrapper, every article about marathon training, it's all about fueling with sugar. It's ingrained in our minds.
Exactly. But Dr. Lake found that once he overcame that initial mental hurdle, fasting while exercising actually improved his performance and reduced his recovery time.
Wait, are you serious? Fasting made him a better athlete.
That's what he experienced. He realized that by not having to digest food, his body could focus all its energy on running. He felt lighter, more energetic, and experienced less muscle soreness. Plus, he didn't have to worry about all those digestive issues that so many athletes struggle with, especially during long runs.
That's amazing. It's like he unlocked a secret energy source. He was tapping into a deeper well of energy, and his body was running more efficiently because it wasn't bogged down by digestion. It's almost like he hacked his metabolism.
It does seem that way, doesn't it? And it raises such an important question. Are we as a society too reliant on carbs, especially as athletes? Could fat adaptation be a more sustainable and effective way to fuel endurance performance? It really makes you think.
This is absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure our listeners are on the edge of their seats. We'll be right back after a quick break to delve deeper into Dr. Lake's experience and the potential of fasting and the ketogenic diet. Don't go anywhere.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thinkiverse podcast, where we're unraveling the mysteries of the human body and its potential.
We've been talking about Dr. Ian Lake, a type 1 diabetic who completed an incredible feat running almost 100 miles while fasting for 5 days.
And we've been discussing how this challenges conventional thinking about fueling for endurance events, especially the idea that we need constant carb loading.
This whole concept of using your own body fat as fuel is a real game changer. It's like we have this massive internal energy reserve just waiting to be tapped into.
You know, Dr. Lake calculated that he had about 85,000 calories of fat stored in his body.
85,000 calories.
That's enough energy to run a marathon every day for a month.
Wow, that's insane. It really puts the abundance of our energy reserves into perspective.
It certainly does, and it makes you wonder if the traditional advice of carb loading before a big race is really necessary, especially if your body is already adapted to burning fat efficiently.
Right, if you're already a fat-burning machine,
Yeah.
do you really need all that extra sugar? Wouldn't that just weigh you down and potentially cause digestive issues?
That's a great point. And Dr. Lake actually addressed that in his experiment. He found that by relying on his body fat for fuel, he completely avoided the digestive problems that plague so many athletes during endurance events. You know, the dreaded runner's trots, the stomach cramps, the need for emergency pit stops.
Oh, tell me about it. I've definitely had my share of those moments during long runs.
Well, Dr. Lake experienced none of that. His body was seamlessly using its internal fuel source, and it was incredibly efficient.
So instead of relying on external sources of energy like gels and sugary drinks, he was running on autopilot, powered by his own body fat. It's almost like he unlocked a hidden superpower.
That's a great way to put it. And it raises such an important question. Are we as athletes too dependent on carbs? Could shifting our focus to fat adaptation be the key to unlocking a new level of performance and endurance?
And let's not forget the anti-inflammatory benefits we talked about earlier. If you're experiencing less inflammation, you're likely to recover faster and have fewer injuries.
Exactly. It seems like there are so many potential advantages to tapping into our body's fat-burning abilities.
This is also fascinating, but I have to ask, is this just for elite athletes pushing their bodies to the extreme? Or could everyday people benefit from these principles as well?
That's a fantastic question. While Dr. Lake's experiment was certainly extreme, The principles behind it can absolutely be applied to everyone, regardless of their fitness level.
So you're saying that even someone who's just starting to exercise could benefit from incorporating some of these ideas.
Absolutely. It's all about understanding how your body uses fuel and finding what works best for you. Remember, everyone is different and there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Okay, so let's break it down for our listeners. What are some practical takeaways from Dr. Lake's experience that they could apply to their own lives?
Well, firstly, it's important to understand the power of fat adaptation. By reducing your reliance on carbohydrates and increasing your intake of healthy fats, you can train your body to become a more efficient fat burner. This can lead to increased energy levels, reduced cravings, and improved metabolic health.
So it's not just about weight loss, it's about optimizing your metabolism and how your body utilizes energy.
Precisely. And another key takeaway is the potential of intermittent fasting. This involves cycling between periods of eating and fasting. It can be as simple as skipping breakfast or having an earlier dinner. Fasting can help lower insulin levels, promote fat burning, and even enhance cellular repair processes.
Wait a minute, you're saying that fasting can actually help your body repair itself?
That's right. When you fast, your body goes into a state of autophagy, which is essentially a cellular cleaning process. It starts breaking down and recycling old and damaged cell components, making way for new healthy cells.
Wow, so it's not just about deprivation, it's about giving your body a chance to reset and rejuvenate.
Exactly. Of course, it's crucial to approach fasting safely and gradually, especially if you have any underlying health conditions. It's always wise to consult with your doctor before making significant dietary changes.
Great advice. Now, I'm curious, did Dr. Lake experience any negative side effects from fasting for those 5 days?
Actually, he reported feeling incredibly energized and focused throughout the entire experiment. He didn't experience the typical energy crashes or mood swings that people often associate with fasting.
Wow, he really was a fasting superhero.
It's pretty remarkable. But it's important to remember that this was a highly controlled experiment, and Dr. Lake is an experienced faster. He was also carefully monitoring his blood sugar and adjusting his insulin accordingly.
Right, so it's not something to try at home without proper guidance and supervision. But his experience does highlight the incredible adaptability of the human body and the amazing potential of tapping into our fat reserves for fuel.
It's almost as if we have this built-in survival mechanism that we've been overlooking for far too long.
Exactly. And as we delve deeper into the science of fasting and ketosis, we're uncovering more and more evidence that these ancient practices may hold the key to unlocking a whole new level of health and performance.
It's an exciting frontier, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This topic is so fascinating, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. I'm already eager to learn more.
Me too. And the good news is that Dr. Lake has shared his experience and insights extensively online. We'll be sure to include links to his work in the show notes so you can explore this topic further.
That's fantastic. Now, before we wrap up this incredible deep dive, I want to remind our viewers that we're just two curious minds exploring fascinating topics like this one right here on Thinkiverse Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking content.
And don't forget to leave a comment below. Tell us what resonated with you from this episode or any questions you might still have.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive. Till then, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what you think is possible.
We'll see you in our next episode.
Welcome back to Thinkiverse Podcast, where we're wrapping up our exploration of fasting and athletic performance.
It's been a fascinating journey, hasn't it? We've been unpacking the incredible story of Dr. Ian Lake, a type 1 diabetic who ran almost 100 miles while fasting for 5 days.
His story has really challenged my thinking about the limits of human endurance and the power of our bodies to adapt.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we often underestimate what we're capable of, especially when it comes to our metabolic flexibility.
One of the things that really struck me about Dr. Lake's experience is that it wasn't about breaking records or proving anything to anyone else. It was driven by personal curiosity and a desire to explore the potential of his own body.
I think that's a really important point. It was a deeply personal experiment, a journey of self-discovery.
And in the process, he stumbled upon insights that could revolutionize the way we think about fueling for endurance activities and managing type 1 diabetes.
His experience has the potential to empower others to challenge conventional wisdom and explore alternative approaches to health and well-being.
It's a reminder that we don't always have to follow the crowd. Sometimes the most groundbreaking discoveries are made by those who dare to question the status quo.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that Dr. Lake's journey is just one example of the incredible things that are possible when we push beyond our perceived limitations.
It's an invitation for all of us to explore our own potential, to experiment with different approaches, and to never stop learning.
And who knows what we might discover along the way.
Well, this has been another absolutely mind-blowing deep dive. I'm walking away with a whole new perspective on the power of fasting and the incredible adaptability of the human body.
Me too. It's been a privilege to delve into this topic with you and our listeners.
And speaking of our listeners, we encourage you to continue exploring this fascinating subject. We'll be providing links to Dr. Lake's work in the show notes so you can delve deeper into his research and experiences.
We'd also love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Did anything surprise you? What questions do you still have?
Drop a comment below and let us know what resonated with you. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to like and subscribe to Thinkiverse Podcast for more explorations into the world of knowledge and discovery.
We'll be back soon with another episode. Until then, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
See you next time on Thinkiverse Podcast.